Good morning. My name is Marilyn and I'm the service leader this morning. I use she, her pronouns and I'm short, so I use a stool. I have long gray hair, glasses, and a green top today, which is a birthday gift. So, friends, let us acknowledge that we walk upon the traditional territories of the Niukanska people, known sometimes by the name Osage, the original nations of this land. They continue to cry out for justice and self-determination. As we settle into this time of meaning making together, we invite you to notice where you are. Feel yourself grounded in the space, release the tension from your body, and take a deep cleansing breath. Our chalice lighting words are Co-Regulation by Elizabeth Mount. From our very first breath, we reach out. Co-regulation, not self-regulation, is in our nature. We find our cues from the sun and the moon, from each parent and caregiver. We find our place in this great turning planet by turning to one another, generation to generation. We awaken to the dawn and fall asleep at the evening's end. Our life's journey is part of something greater, something simple, something divine. A flame cannot be lit without a spark. A life cannot begin without the air. And we cannot begin to find ourselves without love. May we reach out to one another. May we offer love and nurturing care. May we join together in celebration of the interdependence of our lives. In this spirit, let us worship together. Our opening words are a Father's Day prayer by Amy Jones. Today is Father's Day, so we take this moment to hold space for all that may mean to us. We hold love for those who have lost fathers and for those fathers who have lost children. We acknowledge and hold non-binary, transgender, and cisgender dads in families made of two dads, foster and adoptive dads, and single dads. We hold and work to lift up all fathers of color and those fathers raising children of color. We hold fathers kept apart from their children by borders and wars. We hold fathers and children who have lost connection, children who have been disowned or abandoned by their fathers, and the father figures who step in. We hold those longing to become fathers. We hold those who may be full of questions about their biological fathers. Most importantly, we hold and thank the dads, the papas, the daddies, and all who show up every day to give their all to the children who need them. Human relations are complicated. These days of recognition are complex. Please take a moment to breathe in what serves you and breathe out that which does not.
Good morning. My name is Bob Eccles. I go by he, him pronouns. My father was Frederick Charles Eccles. He was of German descent, born in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. He married my mother, Nan Oliver. She was an immigrant from Scotland. My parents eventually settled in Mineral Point, Wisconsin, which is in the southwest part of the state, where they raised 5 kids. I was number 4 of 5. Dad moved there to start a dairy distributorship, but for reasons that are not clearly understood, he lost most of all of what he had put into the new company due to thievery from an unscrupulous partner. Dad was an experienced Navy radio technician in World War II, so he fell back on what he learned in the service and started up a television radio repair business. He had reason to be a downtrodden man after the wrong that was done to him, but that was not my dad. At least none of us kids saw that side of him. We always saw this bigger than life man who always had a smile on his face and a happy greeting for all who he encountered. My dad taught me a number of things. He taught me love for the family. No matter what, he had time for us. He taught me to love music. As Tommy Dorsey's big band music played in the background, he would stop me and remark, "Now there's good music." There was no doubt he was drawing a comparison to the bubblegum music of that time, which is in the 60s. He taught me a love for baseball. We would listen to the play-by-play on the radio of the Milwaukee Braves whenever we had a chance. And we even got to Milwaukee on occasion to pick up TV repair parts when they were needed. But the best of baseball was just getting the chance to play catch with my dad. He taught me that you created opportunities when you work hard and treat people in a way that you would like to be treated. He taught me to own up to my mistakes, no matter the consequences, which reminds me vividly of a Friday one summer when I was home from college and working at a local construction company. And I remember that Friday, I had a date that night, and so I was anxious to be done with work and go out that night. I held a great summer job as a driver of a dump truck hauling gravel. It was common practice at the end of the day for the last load out of the quarry to go to a destination, usually needing just a single load of gravel. This particular Friday, I was to haul a load to spread on the driveway of Maynard Mewis. He was a renowned businessman in town. And in those days, there just weren't very many unpaved, or weren't that many paved driveways. So he was looking for a gravel bed. When I arrived, I got all set up to spread an uphill incline going from the street toward the garage. I had drawn a crowd of kids, who would witness my mastery of this skillful event. I checked the chains that would keep the end gate from opening too far. I engaged the power takeoff that lifted the dump truck box into the air just to the right angle to allow gravel to travel efficiently to the end to the end gate. Then in low gear, I started forward and released the end gate with a tug of a lever to begin the flow of gravel onto the driveway. All was good. I was making my way up the incline until I started seeing the garage in front of me disappear and soon saw only blue sky. The truck cab had lifted off the ground And then it returned to the ground with a boom. Unknowingly, I had hooked an overhead telephone line until it broke, sending the truck back to the ground and dumping a huge pile of gravel on the drive. I immediately drove to the company plant, jumped into a big Michigan end loader, and returned to the scene of the accident to mitigate the damage. When I finally got home, I told my dad of what had happened. I asked him, "What do you think I should do?" He said what he didn't want him to, he said what I didn't want to hear. Go over right now to see Roger, the company owner, and explain the whole situation. And in my head, it was, not grumpy old Roger, oh no. Never wanting to disappoint my dad, I followed through. Surprise, surprise, my life did not end. It was sometime later in life as a young man that I reflected back and came to realize the privilege I took for granted growing up, and that it was not a common experience for a whole lot of kids. I was clearly a fortunate son. The very most important lesson I took from my father was that integrity matters. I did my best to instill that virtue in my boys and sometimes wondered if I ever got through. I remember not that many years ago when I was having a serious discussion with the boys about a tough decision they were facing. And I left them with the words, "Do what you know is right." And as I was leaving the room, and from my youngest, I heard, "We know, Dad, integrity. Do what's right, even when nobody's looking." That was a proud moment for this father.
Good morning. I'm Barbara Vicente. I use she, her pronouns. I'm tall. I'm a young senior. I have curly silvery hair, blue glasses, and I'm wearing a floral dress. And there's my dad. A couple of years ago, I had the privilege of honoring my mother and my grandmother on Mother's Day. And so I was happy to be able to do this and honor my father today, Frank Brand. My dad grew up in the Chicago area during the Depression, never really had a chance to travel anywhere. And when he graduated from high school, that's his high school graduation picture, World War II was going on. So he enlisted in the Navy, trained at Great Lakes, and then was stationed at Bremerton in Puget Sound across from Seattle. During a leave, he took the train back to Chicago, married my mother, his high school sweetheart, and they took the train back to Bremerton. And after the war ended, they wanted to stay out there. They loved the area, but the family that they had planned was not happening. So they took the train back to the Chicago suburbs, and boom, over the next 15 years, they had 5 girls and 3 boys. So my dad had, those train travels was the first time he had a chance to see part of the United States. And with his growing family, he thought it was important that we have those experiences too. So the next picture is our first camper. This is a newspaper picture, so it wasn't too sharp. My dad took an old school bus and stripped it out and built a camper. So we had Navy cots strung on the back, a small bathroom, a small kitchen, and the seats would on either side of the aisle faced forward if we were traveling, or you could reverse the front ones, raise a table, and we would have tables for meals or playing games. And then at night, they went flat, so you have 2 extra bunks. So I'm in the middle. It's hard to see that picture. I'm in the middle with my mom, and my dad is on the right side with my youngest brother. So at that time, there were 6 of us, 2 parents, frequently grandparents, when we traveled around the Midwest to visit relatives, and we did get to Yellowstone in that bus. When I was in my early teens, my dad found bus number 2. I don't have a picture of that one. It was blue, it was snub-nosed engine in the back. It had been used to haul tires. Well, again, he stripped it out and he built it similar to our other one. We had numerous years of travel with that one, sometimes camping around the Great Lakes. One winter Christmas holiday, we were at the Florida Keys, and our biggest trip was the West Coast. We went down to Texas, the Southwest, up the Pacific Coast. My dad was able to visit some friends from the Bremerton area and then back to Chicago. 8 kids, 2 parents, 6 weeks in a bus, lots of adventures, but we were all glad to get home at that time. By the time I graduated nursing school and by the time I graduated high school and I was in nursing school, and my older brother and sister were either in school or working, we no longer traveled with the family, but my dad and my mom still traveled with the younger 5. And then at a much later time in life, my dad finally bought his real camper that he didn't have to build. And he and my mom continued to travel, frequently taking grandkids. When I was in my 20s, my older sister was living in Germany and I had a summer free and I planned a 4-month travel to Europe and Great Britain. And this was before computers. So I had library books, maps, calendars, and I'm plotting out what I want to see and do. And by the time I'm booking my flights, my dad is asking, well, what if you don't like it? And I says, Dad, how can I not like it? And there were a lot of highlights on that, traveling with my sister. But one of the most memorable parts was a week when my parents came over to Germany. We traveled with them and my dad met his aunt and his cousins for the first time. So we had a lot of good adventures. And since that time, I've traveled nationally and internationally. My Hawaii is not international, but my dress is reminiscent of my wedding with my husband on the beach on a sunset in Hawaii. So today on Father's Day, I'm glad that I'm able to honor my father, and I give thanks for the love of travel and adventure that he instilled in me. And I'd also like to mirror on to Bob. My dad grew up at a time that integrity was important, work ethics were important, and I am so glad that he raised the 8 of us, that what we have achieved today is what we have earned, and that's thanks to my dad too. So thank you, and I wish a happy Father's Day to all the fathers in here.
Good morning, almost afternoon. They say you shouldn't judge a person until you've walked a mile in their shoes. Today, I'm going to talk about my father and what I've learned trying to walk in his. To start, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Neil A. Richardson Sr. I use he, him pronouns. And today I'm wearing a button-up shirt and slacks, similar to my dad's, with an extra pair of pens in my pocket. I've been attending for a while now, but I believe this is the first time that I've had the opportunity to address everyone at once, so I apologize in advance if my nerves or emotions get the better of me. I was raised a sixth-generation Mormon, and although I no longer am a member of that church, I believe that my family history with church played a large part in my relationship with my dad, and later my experiences as a husband and father. Family was and is very important to me, and I give a lot of credit to the church of my youth for teaching the importance of family and encouraging us all to love one another. Father's Day can be complicated for many reasons, and in sharing my favorite memories of my dad, I want to acknowledge that everyone's lived experiences are different, and I hope that even if you may not have a positive relationship with your father, you can still benefit from my message today. The next photo is a photo of my dad when he was a little bit younger. My dad is David B. Richardson. His father, Darwin, worked in the copper mines of Utah. My dad worked in other mines, uranium and coal, as a certified safety professional. And I started my career data mining medical records for a healthcare company. And now my kids have all beaten the Ender Dragon in Minecraft. So you might say we have a tradition going. Music was also a large part of my experience at church. Both of my parents loved music. They taught my siblings and I to love it too. My grandmother on my dad's side was a piano teacher. My dad is an accomplished piano player, and I'm an experienced piano mover. So music is also part of our DNA, I guess. One of our family pastimes would be to watch Disney or Broadway musicals at home video and learning all the words. Some of my favorite included Newsies by Alan Menken, Oklahoma by Rodgers and Hammerstein, or Into the Woods by Stephen Sondheim. 25 years later, with my own family still loves singing along with musicals, including Disney's Moana or The Greatest Showman or Hamilton, to name a few. Singing with my kiddos brings back wonderful memories of singing with my dad and mom and siblings growing up. In preparing this message, I had the opportunity to read a collection of memories that my dad wrote. It was inspiring to read about his experience growing up and comparing them to my own. You'd think we were related. One of my prompts that Dad wrote about was for the question, how did you feel when your first child was born? Dad's answer was, first was the miracle of the birth. Second was how thankful he was for Andrea, his wife, who had given birth after hours of labor. And third was a feeling of responsibility and commitment to Alan and Andrea as a father and husband. I feel like that's a great summary of how it feels to be a new father. And I'd say my experience with Mallow, our oldest, was very similar. We have a photo of him next. Mallow was delivered through an emergency C-section, and the fact that it's possible to do that today is a medical miracle. I was incredibly grateful for Melissa's sacrifice to bring Mallow and all 4 of our children into the world. And I remember the emotion and fear being overwhelming when I realized the responsibility required to raise this little human with froggy legs and tiny feet. Being a father wasn't always fun and easy. Many of the years as a dad involved just trying to stay afloat, as Melissa and I navigated trading jobs in school, medical checkups, fevers, and myriad other challenges that come with being a new parent. I distinctly remember spending over $300 in a month on diapers for quite a while with our 3 oldest. In addition, the overwhelming feeling of inadequacy combined with the demands of life outside of home were very real to me. If any of you are struggling with this stage of parenting, I would encourage you to keep trying and reach out for the support you need wherever it may be. While those early years were challenging, many of the joys of being a father feel like they started when the kids were old enough to go camping and hiking and adventuring with the local Cub Scout troop. Some of my early memories with my dad were when I joined the Boy Scouts of America at our church and won the father-son cake decorating contest, or when we would build Pinewood Derby cars together. I still have the 3 we built in my scouting keepsake box, and they still weigh almost exactly 5 ounces. When my kids were old enough to join the Cub Scouts, I was eager to continue what Dad started by volunteering as a scout leader. I've probably built 20 or more Pinewood Derby cars over the last 12 years that I've been back in scouting. And the next picture is a photo of my dad and my brothers. My dad was our scoutmaster or assistant scoutmaster for most of my childhood in scouting. I remember going on hikes and camping and earning merit badges with him. All 4 of my brothers in my family earned the rank of Eagle Scout, and many of my nephews have as well. I cherish those memories and experiences that I had with him over those years.
Yeah.
One of my favorite memories with my dad in scouting was when we earned the Nuclear Science Merit Badge. At the time, it was the coolest looking merit badge because it had a nucleus and orbiting electrons. They've changed it since then. To fill one of the requirements, Dad took me to the power plant he worked at and let me use a real Geiger counter. It was super cool to tour the office with giant generators and coal and pipes and steam, and yes, some radiation. Although probably not as much radiation as when he worked in the uranium mines out west. In a similar fashion, I've really enjoyed Bring Your Child to Work Day for the last 12 years I've been working full time. The only difference is that instead of a Geiger counter, I let my kids build with Lego in the desk. As the kids have grown older and aged out of scouts, I found new challenges and adventures to experience. I remember asking my older brother if parenting ever gets easier, and he said, not really. The challenges just change. What I found with parenting is it can be one of the hardest things to do correctly. Nobody really knows how to do it perfectly, and many times we make mistakes and get overwhelmed and frustrated. But I found often that parenting involves trial and error, and that's okay. Someone once said that parenting is a bit like cooking pancakes. You might mess up the first few times, but if you do your best and learn from your mistakes, you'll eventually work a great system out, eventually. For as long as I can remember, I would ask Dad what he wanted for Father's Day, and he would say good kids and straight A's. Depending on the year, I would do one of the two and make up for the other one with a tie. This year, my kids didn't get straight A's, but they got me a tie as well. And yet another tradition continues. I'll close by sharing a memory that both my dad and I remember fondly. While I was in Utah for a while, I had the grand idea to hike up Mount Olympus, a 6.9 mile, 4,087 foot elevation hike with rocky climb in the Wasatch Mountains. We started early in the morning and hiked until we were about halfway up. just above the tree line. When it turned from a dirt trail to practically a cliff of rocks and snow, we both decided we'd had enough fun and took a photo and climbed back down. About 15 years later, I had a similar experience climbing a much shorter mountain near the university with my younger brother and with my oldest Mallow. And there's a photo of us on the top. To wrap up my analogy of walking in someone else's shoes, whoops. It's a picture of me in a red shirt. There we go. To wrap up my analogy of walking a mile in someone else's shoes, I learned that the goal isn't to be exactly like the person you're emulating. The goal is to understand them. As generations come and go, we all face different challenges and triumphs. The experiences I've had with my children, while similar, are not the same experiences my dad had with me or my siblings. The same goes for my grandfather and their children, and that's okay. Simply by looking back and trying to understand my ancestors, I have found that while we are separated by a generation, we are more alike than we are different. So they say you shouldn't judge a person until you've walked a mile in their shoes. I've been trying to follow my dad's example for 40 years. I'm incredibly grateful for my relationship with my dad and mom and all my siblings. And I'm grateful for the opportunity I have to lead another generation with Melissa and my 4 children. Thank you and happy Father's Day.